what do we make of it in order that they won't be doing something that ostensibly should help our case or our cause, but it turns out to be divergent to it unwittingly, not because they want it to be that way. So that's two. So technical level, AU Commission. Then there is the political level of the presidents in summit and now having to make a decision on how they would act collectively so that it is indeed Africa's year of education that translates to Africa decade on education, that translates to Africa's journey to 2063 based on education. So that's sort of the way that I have sliced it, because if we don't slice it that way, what would happen is that we would just make some broad conversations and this session would be over and we would all walk away. So let me put something on the table in terms of the first one. The first one is in terms of country-specific programming on foundational literacy, rethinking it. As we have discussed across various ideas and initiatives that countries are doing, and listening to experts on these issues, such as Ben Piper, for example, telling us that we actually can solve this problem. Why? Because evidence abounds that this problem once existed and was solved in certain places. So if it was solved in certain places, it can be solved in all other places. So it can be solved. Are the ministers sort of saying, I'm going back knowing this can be solved and I will solve it? Number two is the interventions that are known to solve the problem. So this whole thing around pedagogical structure issues and also the managerial things that are connected to adopting these measures. And then the whole conversation around the scale at which all of these interventions can be implemented. How do we think of that scale in the light of the barriers that we sometimes mention? And some people can be mentioning the barriers, but it's the wrong barrier. For example, you know, you can be thinking that if only we can get all our children in air-conditioned classrooms, if only we can get, you know, the devices that they can learn with so that they can catch up with the 20, well, those are important things, but are they the most significant barriers that your own system needs to be addressing? So I just sort of want to at least start with the country-specific issues. How are we processing it based on some of the things that we have heard here today? So it would be good to start with some of the ministers that have not, you know, yet said a word. The kinds of evidence to action approach. What is it that you need? What kind of support must we have? I said to Ben, I said to Albert that I kind of am thinking that a starter pack approach for solving this problem might just be a good idea for our continent. So a minister enters into office and says, only 3% of my children are able to read with understanding. Where do I start? And there's a starter pack that has been developed by all of us. Not that all situations are the same, but there are some standard things that are the same. So I'd like to ask is there a sense that a starter pack that just looks at educational systems and then would say, if you want to address this matter, this is how you go from A to B to C to D. These are the kinds of tools you need. These are the kinds of timelines that you need. I think that we should start with that, and then we would move to the AUC and how to engage them as they prepare for year on education. And then in terms of how to make sure that our presidents, when they will gather first in January. In January, all they will be doing would be, they would have about 5 minutes for each of them to say something about the year of education. We need to have them not just say anything, just write a flowery speech that does not touch the ground. And then the next meeting would be, so at that meeting, they would say, AUC, go now and do X, Y, Z, and come back with the paper in July. For each of those stages, there are things that are required. So I open the floor now. Maybe we should start with the Minister of Ghana, Minister of State for Ghana. Yes. Maybe a second mic.
Thank you very much.
Minister, I think you should sit down. It will save us some time. Anyone talking should just sit down. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Obi. And to all our respected colleagues, ministers, Albert of ADEA, it's a great privilege to be here. We are talking about foundational learning. And all of us recognize that education is a fantastic opportunity and holds extraordinary power to transform the fortunes of our countries. But foundational learning is the fundamental. When the conversation around learning poverty started, and we saw pre-COVID levels estimated around 85, 87%, we were alarmed in Ghana. But we took our minds to early grade reading assessment we conducted in Ghana in the year 2015, where the indication was that only 2% of people at P2, grade 2, only 2% could read for understanding. So we were really shocked, and we needed to do something to cure learning poverty. It is not okay that 94% of our children should not be able to contribute meaningfully, and it's not okay that they are not reading. So with a number of interventions were kickstarted. One, we had to mainstream pre-primary education. Early childhood education was mainstreamed into basic education. The right age enrollment campaign was done forcefully. We invested a lot into recruiting teachers specializing in early childhood and primary education. And then we also ensured that TLMs were available. But beyond that, with the support of the World Bank, we're able to target 10,579 least performing schools with targeted interventions, teacher training, TLMs, training all stakeholders.
Tell them what TLM is, because you're sounding like a World Bank staff.
Teaching and learning material. Yeah. When you have Lolo, Obiagali in the house, you'll definitely be guided well. So we invested a lot in teaching and learning material to ensure that every child had the required material, teachers had the required teacher guides, and were trained in that pedagogy. We have been using the structured pedagogy. And more importantly, accountability was strengthened right from the system level, subnational level, the district level, to the school level, and even for parents also to realize their role. Then we also had a targeted approach to phonics-based approach to teaching how reading must be done. And we have a language policy of first 3 years, pupils reading in their local language and then transitioning to English. Our biggest challenge was the transition. I remember my days after JHS, I couldn't even transition properly. I don't remember when I transitioned. So with the support of USID, we were able to conduct an intervention we call Transition to English. which for over a 4-year period, we kept measuring, seeing where the gaps were, and then augmenting on the interventions. But fast forward, in 2021 and 2022, we conducted a national standardized test. And that national standardized test was numeracy and literacy test that was administered to all schools across the country, P2 and P4. P4 are the grades where children around the age of 10 would be. So from 2% of pupils that were able to read in 2015, we now moved to an improvement to 34% in 2021 and 2022. And then for those who are in around the age of 10 in grade 4, we had an improvement to 54%. So in learning poverty, for interventions, combined interventions we have undertaken over the years, we are very confident that just about 44% learning poverty prevalence is what is existing, which we want to cure further. And the target is to get to a point where only 10% may not be able to read, and 90%. So the new, and to go to scale, another initiative we have adopted or informed by the principal, Dr. Obi would say, if we put our minds to something that works, it would work and the transformation would take place. And also from the principles we shared by Dr. Piper, we need to be able to know what has worked and then get more resources targeted at that and go to scale. So communities of excellence, which would now be a continuation of the transition to English class from USID, and also all the other interventions from we've enjoyed from World Bank, which is ongoing, is to target the transformation one community at a time. And the targets, what we want to measure as our outcome successes, is that at the end of the implementation, we want to see every community, every village, minimum 90% of children at the age of 10 must be able to read proficiently. And 90% of those students must be able to transition to secondary school, and 90% of that must further transition to tertiary. And when that is done, then we are sure that we have achieved something. But in all of this, we want to carry along the community. So the traditional rulers, the chiefs, the parents, the assembly members, the district chief executives, all are trained in their roles, whilst teachers and school support improvement officers and district directors of education are also trained in various methods and pedagogies, including play-based pedagogies, which Saber Education, UNICEF, Right to Play, and other partners are supporting us. So it's a combination of interventions. And now we are moving into even placing emphasis that as we are making progress in curing fundamental foundational numeracy and foundational literacy, we want to lay emphasis on science, technology, engineering, even at foundational level to deepen relevance. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much. Thank you. Nothing says you can't clap for a speaker, though, you know, so because there was some energy in articulating in a very coherent way the path that they have taken. And I think, you know, to you, Ben, as you listened to what the Minister of State for Education just laid out, what aspect of your 4 things came across?
I suppose my
we have many more mics.
Thanks so much, and thank you to the Deputy Minister from Ghana for your comments. I think Ghana is an exciting example of moving from pilot to scale, etc. And I guess my real question, Robbie, is about the process of scaling, because you're in a moment where, depending on where your country is, where you don't have the same level of donor-funded support on implementation. Because if I understand correctly, this new external funded program is looking at accountability. So my main question, Dr. Obi, is for those teachers in the normal school who do have these materials, are they using them? And how can the ministry be sure? How can we work through regional structures to really encourage that? Because that to me would be the main question I would want to know, is how do you make sure that utilization, implementation fidelity remains very high? That will determine whether or not that 34% continues to rise, or if it would go back down. It's that implementation fidelity. Thank you.
Is a different way of asking that question about how is this systematized, that if the two of you that are currently the ministers in education were not there, can we assume that this foundation thing is now rock solid in Ghana and that we're not going to come back 4 years after and find that Ghana is back to 4% of the children learning? And that's the question.
Dr. Obi, that's a very important question and very important concern from Dr. Piper. I think it is a question of sustainability. And so at the closure of that phase, what we said to our partners was that we are closing this phase, but we are taking it over. So the blueprints are there. The methodologies are documented. We started with some pilot schools, but the blueprints are there, the TLMs, the teaching learning material. So we are just scaling up the training of teachers that were not first within the pilot schools or districts. We are scaling up training across to all teachers and all district directors of education, regional directors of education. So it becomes a systemic approach. So even governments may change, but it's a system that will be replicated and expanded across. So from the levels of teaching learning materials that were supplied by our donor, we went forward from there to ensure every other school had new textbooks to sufficient levels, so no school would lack, whether they first were within the pilot group or not. So we have taken it over, and our president, we call him in Ghana the education president. Recently, the past 3 years, when we, just like in the country, we had our own economic setbacks, he cuts every other sector's budgetary allocations, but education was untouched to ensure we sustain on what is working. Thank you.
Excellent. I would have come to you, Sierra Leone, but I think we should go east. And so, you know, I was looking for the either the Rwandan, the Ugandan, the Kenyan. Who is here? The Ugandan. Yes.
Thank you so much. Before I became a doctor of books, I was first a doctor of human being. I became a doctor and I specialized in pediatrics. I just want to give a narrative from the medical perspective. When a baby is born, the weight of that brain is 400 grams. And a brain must attain an adult weight, which is 1.4, 1.5 kilograms. And for that baby to attain the weight of an adult brain, it has to develop. It develops 80% of the adult brain weight by the age of 2, between 2 to 3 years. By the age of 5 years, that baby has attained 90% of the adult brain weight, meaning the remaining 10 to 20% is from 2 years or 5 years up to 18 years. Number 2, the brain commands all the human being activities. It's the one that controls the developmental milestone of a child. Any disruption of that brain at that tender age results and affects the child's developmental milestone. Whether walking, language, anything, it affects the child. Meaning the first 2 years is a very critical year for that baby. Number 3, when a baby is born, as a parent, you must do everything possible to nourish that baby in terms of vaccination, nutrition, everything. Why do I bring this concept? I'm trying to link this health concept with foundational learning. Typical, just a typical example. In the same vein, if a child will not have a solid, firm foundation in the first years of education, it will just result like a typical complete brain damage of that child. Now, as Uganda, we have acknowledged that there is a problem. There is a problem that collectively we must work together. An assessment was done in 2018 to look at the early grades in terms of literacy and numeracy. And that was before COVID. And we found out by that time, only 55% of our learners by grade 3, they are able to attain the required level of numeracy. And this is mostly in urban. Rural is even worse. And only 49% of our learners by grade 3, P3, they are able to attain the required level of literacy. Majority urban compared to rural. And predominantly girls are scored upper compared to the boys. This was before COVID. Now, given the problem of COVID, yet children are disadvantaged, especially those in the rural. The initiative, the innovations that were put on board using ICT, using whatever material, did not advantage those learners in the rural place. What is that as a country? What is the priority? What is our country agenda that we put in place? Just like it has been said, number one, we've talked too much. We've made declaration. We've committed. But we are saying now, we must move from this commitment to action-oriented, action that is focused, action that has got set goals, and action that is clear with objective that we can achieve. And in line with that, when you look at our budget in terms of investment, when you go back to the Dhaka Declaration, where percentage of our national budget should be committed to education, we still do not have adequate budget, yet the portion that is for the foundational learning is low. But importantly, we as a country moving forward, our first priority is in reforms. One of the key reforms is we want to invest much more in data. We want to invest much more in survey. And that is why we are working together with the partners, with ADEA, with the Human Capital Africa, and other partners who are investing in research. We want to have data for evidence-based to tell us the problem, the extent of the problem, data to give accountability, data to be able to access progress of this foundational learning. So that is the first step we are moving to. We've started the progress, and we hope to move faster. Number two, we think the review of our curriculum is another area. We have an old curriculum, and the curriculum is not learner-centered, even for foundational learning, for the primary. We want to review the curriculum such that it can give the skills that is much required for this early grade. Even if we deal much on numeracy and literacy, but there should be basic life skills, this age bracket. And besides the curriculum, we also have reform in the teachers' profession. And I think those are the few I can talk for now. But I want to tell you, working together with the partners, moving together as a country, it has helped us to give a homemade solution that can address our country as Uganda, as Africa. I thank you.
Thank you so very much, Madam Minister. Yes, please. So, yes, this is Zimbabwe. I'm coming to Southern Africa. I'm thinking it, so we had the Minister of Ghana, we've had the Minister of Uganda, and in what we're hearing, there is absolutely no doubt that someone somewhere in each of the countries is doing something. Is doing something. And some of well, this is better than this is better than when I would pick up a microphone in certain countries, Chinese woman would be talking, you know, rather than, you know. So, so there is something somewhere being done. My question really takes us back to this matter of urgency and scale. We can be doing some things right, but I think that when we gather together in this kind of a format, it is to pick up an entirely new level of momentum to sort of say, yeah, we have one or two things that we're doing that's making sense, but how do we get the kind of momentum? Because part of what we're discussing is really that when countries, when you see how even the concept note around year of education is going, you can see that there is this desire for us to jumpstart and just be like others in the 21st century. It's a good idea. It's a desirable. But how about this talk about the people in the rural communities that were living behind, and it's mostly the children of the poor. And so they are going to be stuck in intergenerational poverty. So if our 34% improvement really captures those in the peri-urban areas, and then there are these other ones that are left behind in the process of the improvement, that's not what we're here to do, right? We want to be able to have a sense of how does the scale momentum lift all the children with it? How does it do that? And for that, I wanted to, I know it's a small island state, but Mauritius, is Mauritius here? Yes. For those enclaves in the rural communities, what was it that you did differently that really precipitated the overall approach of improvement that you then saw over time? Can I get a microphone to him?
Thank you very much. Well, what I can share with you is that in Mauritius, we started what we call the primary school readiness program. Okay, it was an initiative to assess and support the learning needs of children entering grade 1, and it is a 3-step program where open activities, that is mostly play-based. We have semi-guided activities, guided activities. And these programs aims to identify the strength and weaknesses of each child and provide the appropriate remediation and enrichment program that is based on what we call the learner development profile. And it involves the collaboration of parents, school support teachers, and here may I add that each and every school at grade 1 have teachers. One teacher that is a main school teacher, and the support teacher who pulls out children who requires remedial education and have a special program with these children. This is what we have been doing right now. But what I can say is that as from next year, pre-primary education will be free in Mauritius. Right now, education in Mauritius, be it from grade 1 up to the undergraduate courses, they are free. And the sector itself, it was predominantly led by the private sector. What we have done is that we are providing support to all these private private pre-primary schools, be it for the staff costs and also the operational costs. So as from next year, 80% of the schools have already opted to join the free pre-primary schools scheme. And it is not just about joining the scheme. We are also looking at the curriculum, the teachers' training, and also we are bringing in the necessary amendments to the law so that in future it is a sector which is being regulated and also professionalized.
Thank you. Let me ask a question. How many of the ministers have the structured pedagogy approach in their country at this time? Like you follow a structured pedagogy. I can see just 2 hands that are up. So for example, if we identify that a structured approach that connects the curriculum to a very clear and coherent way of the lesson notes, of the equipping of the teachers that teach the lessons in the classroom in ways that they not are just people who have been trained, but people who actually get support in the form of coaching, so that as each child's performance is assessed, they know exactly what it is that they should be correcting for. So this kind of an approach, the reason that the structured pedagogy approach works, ma'am, in South Africa, I believe, would be because you're thinking of it from a perspective of whether you are a poor child or a rich child. This lesson note taught in this particular way would be beneficial to you in terms of your learning. Am I correct in that assessment, or you look at it in a slightly different way in South Africa?
No, it's quite different in the sense that it would have been an intervention for those schools that are not doing well, but also leaving space for teacher innovation. So it's not really like your state structured sponsored. So it's really like a guidance to say, here's material to support you, here's a lesson plan to support you, here's your teacher's guides to support your teaching. But it's not like at every school. I mean, there's some schools and some teachers who are able to do it. So it's targeted.
Yes, I know. So we're saying the same thing, because I wasn't at all alluding to the fact that you have to impose it in places where they don't need it. And then it also contextual, right? That's the point you're making. Oh, it's not a legal instrument. It's not a policy instrument that is adopted by, but it works. It does work for you. Do you think that your approach works for you? Because I know that there are issues, right? There are issues. So since there are issues, we just heard about going from 4% to 30, Minister Ghana, from 4% to 34%, from 2% to 34%. And the adoption of structured pedagogy was important for you. Why so? Why so? What exceptional contribution to the improvement did it make?
Because that way you are able to offer support to the teachers. They have a guided format that they are trained in, and then you can come back to measure where there are gaps.
Yes. Yes. This is so important. So if we're going to get to scale, just the word structure is important for us as Africans. We know that. We know that we're not immediately given to a structured approach, because we are mostly people, we're very, I'm looking for the right word, we're very restlessly creative. We're restlessly creative. So we would like to do one thing and then do another thing and then do another thing, and it can sometimes then mean that we're not coherently driving in a direction that we can measure and then look at why it's not working, improve it, and then move forward on it. So it looks to me like this concept of a structured pedagogy is something that's on the table for all of us as an important thing to consider. It looks like that. While I keep you, I want to go online because Maria to Kone, is it? Did I get the last? Yes, I got it right. She is the Minister of Education for Cote d'Ivoire, and she's online, and she would like to contribute to this contribution. And then when we come back from her, we will continue by still taking someone from Southern Africa, because I would like to hear from Namibia. You know, the Namibia. We want to hear from you, and then we would come back up to Southern Africa and hear from the minister from Zimbabwe, and then go east again. And I think that's when we begin to sort of tie this particular round up, because the other two that go directly to the year of education should be easy to slice and finish. Actually, the minister for Sierra Leone is the last person on my list going West Africa. So over to you, Minister. Good to see you.
Bonjour, bonjour à tous. Bonjour à tous, chers participants au forum de dialogue politique de haut niveau de l'ADEA sur l'apprentissage. Je suis heureuse de revoir certains visages. Albert, bonjour. Je me réjouis de participer à cette rencontre qui fait état des engagements qui sont les nôtres face au défi mondial que constitue l'apprentissage fondamental. Je vais juste rapidement parler de la problématique de l'apprentissage fondamental en Côte d'Ivoire, comme je l'avais déjà indiqué lors de la triennale de 2022 à Mauritius. La Côte d'Ivoire a convenu d'inscrire dorénavant toutes les initiatives relatives aux apprentissages dans le cadre du programme national d'amélioration des premiers apprentissages, programme que nous appelons le PNAPAS. Alors, féliciter et dire merci à tous les partenaires qui nous accompagnent sur la pédagogie structurée et sur les cours de remédiation. Avec tous les efforts conjugués, la Côte d'Ivoire a commencé le processus de généralisation de l'installation des premières compétences au niveau du CEP, ainsi que celle de la remédiation du CE au CM2 pour tous les enfants, filles ou garçons, tenant compte du genre et tenant compte également des spécificités, surtout pour les enfants à besoins spécifiques. Je voudrais à propos insister sur les bons résultats que nous avons obtenus avec le programme d'enseignement ciblé, PEC en anglais, ou TAL, PEC en français ou TAL en anglais. C'est un processus de généralisation qui, pour nous, va de pair avec la formation continue des enseignants. Et je signale que nous avons également pris un arrêté pour l'évaluation des enseignants. Afin de mieux orienter nos politiques, nous avons créé au sein de notre ministère un laboratoire pour l'éducation qui s'appelle EdLab, qui va s'atteler à générer des données probantes. Et au travers de la direction de la veille et du suivi des programmes, la Côte d'Ivoire vulgarise aujourd'hui les outils et les formats d'évaluation standardisés des apprentissages par leur insertion dans le calendrier des compositions et des examens tant au primaire qu'au secondaire. Notre volonté, chers participants, est de développer auprès de tous les acteurs de la chaîne de pédagogie une culture de l'évaluation des apprentissages. Voici en gros ce que je voudrais dire, et dire que je voulais lancer un appel à tous lancer un appel à toute volonté soucieuse de l'éducation de nos enfants à nous soutenir dans la mise en œuvre du PNAPAS, Programme national d'amélioration des apprentissages, afin de relever les défis qui sont liés au passage à l'échelle. Je voudrais adresser mes vives félicitations aux organisateurs d'avoir initié cette plateforme d'échange qui valorise les bonnes pratiques et l'apprentissage par les pairs, si nécessaire, pour relever un des défis de notre siècle, celui de l'amélioration des apprentissages fondamentaux. Et quand je fais le lien avec notre continent, parce que je crois que la thématique que nous traitons, nous devons parler de l'expérience du pays, mais faire le lien en termes de leçons pour le continent, les priorités continentales de ce que je perçois par rapport à la question de la Côte d'Ivoire, les priorités, se résument en 3 éléments pour moi. Le premier élément, c'est la question de la pédagogie structurée et de la rémédiation. Le deuxième élément, c'est la question de la formation des enseignants. Le troisième élément, c'est la question de la culture de l'évaluation des apprentissages, évaluation des enseignants et également disposer d'outils et de formats d'évaluation standardisés pour l'Afrique. Bien évidemment, il s'agit de comparer ce qui est comparable. Et quand je parle le dernier point dont je peux parler, la question de laboratoire pour l'éducation, ici, c'est pour générer des données et aider à mesurer, comme on avait conclu en île Maurice. Il s'agit ici de problèmes de compétences, recruter le personnel qu'il faut. On a des institutions, on a des instituteurs dans la plupart de nos laboratoires. Or, on devrait pouvoir prendre des professionnels de la recherche pour nous aider justement dans cette production de données, dans le suivi et dans l'évaluation. Voilà ce que je voulais dire dans le suivi et dans le rapportage.
Thank you so much. Please let's acknowledge. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. She said something about learning from one another, right? And that's what we're doing. This exercise is that learning process. And we do need to sort of make it clear as part of the message living from here that the ministers of education on the continent are already on a shared platform that ADEA provides, through which this learning, this sharing of ideas and learning understanding the learning process and how to achieve it better, really works. Minister Namibia, I wanted, or permanent secretary, who am I addressing? Deputy Minister of Namibia. Another thing that was said a lot since this morning has been teaching at the right level. So this whole idea of the teacher being, other than the child, the next most important person in all that we're doing and saying is the teacher. So this teaching at the right level is something that clearly works. What has been your experience in terms of the right level or the wrong level?
Thank you for the question. Maybe before I answer that question,
maybe you want to use my own mic.
Maybe before I go direct to the question, I want to share with you that Namibia's situation, I remember, for example, our result, the end result before a child go to tertiary education was not so good the previous year. And the minister and deputy minister was summoned to the head of state to explain. But in the meantime, what we discover, as we were discussing here, reading and writing is really important. As the facilitator said, if we can just do it at the right time. So from 2015, the Ministry of Basic Education, Arts and Culture you came up with the reform where we decided that pre-primary should be the first grade to be added to the junior primary. And then we continue in that way. But what we discussed also is the challenge we have to include. We only did some at a small scale. As you know, Namibia, the vastness, to reach where we really need it, it is a challenge. But we committed ourselves to provide quality education, which is inclusive, despite all these challenges. As we were embarked on the reform, since the Ministry of Education divided in basic and higher, the higher education, we didn't bring them on board to produce the teachers who will assist in that regard. It's only later that we brought them in that, no, we need teachers who train teachers as we are going with the reform. The resources is another thing. We have to bring in infrastructures which fits the smaller ones, as we agree that to teach them under a tree is not a solution. So at this moment, started last year, we went on advocacy with the private sectors to come on board because of the constraints of the budget. And we are getting really support, despite small it is, but we appreciate that. Then within the Ministry of Education, I like our former medical pediatric doctors say, for us in education, we have a coordinated body, which is coordinated by the Ministry of Education. However, the two other legs is the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Gender, just to catch up the development of the children at a very, very low scale. So we targeted, as I mentioned, few learners with the program called Jollyphonics, which is working very well because it's fun, etc. But we want to see whether we cannot go on bigger scale.
Yes.
If we are supported.
Yeah.
I think that's okay. But the right to teach at the right thing.
Yes.
We are targeting the foundation also.
You started it.
Yeah.
Yes. Because this teaching at the right level, there is this style, an organization that really gets it, especially around our own African context.
Yeah,
you definitely need to speak with them, because I like what you said. The tertiary education result pushed you back to the foundation that people don't want to think about. You know, part of it is also because, as I said in my opening, you see, tertiary education, which people do you think mostly gets there? Often, the larger percentage that get there are children of the middle class. And the children of the middle class being affected by something would get more attention of the political leaders because they matter. And so foundational literacy and numeracy suffers from attention because it's not a problem that the children of the middle class suffer, which is why you have to be the champions for the children of the low-income class that are the ones stuck. It is a double whammy for your parents to be poor and for you to now be in a public school system that fails you. So there's no place of escape. They need champions. You have to be the champions. That's essentially what one of the commitments that we have to take away from here, saying, since the continent is saying year of education, let's not leave them to begin to talk too much of the highfalutin, as if to say the only people that matter are the children of the middle class. No, the ones we're leaving behind, we will be champions for them. Africa, we must pay attention to this foundational literacy and numeracy, because that is the pathway of escape of those children that we're leaving behind. Zimbabwe, you're so close to your sister in Namibia. It looks like you solved this problem, and we would like to learn from you.
Thank you very much, our esteemed doctor. My name is Honorable T. Moyo, Minister of Primary and Secondary Education in Zimbabwe. I feel honored and privileged to be given this opportunity to share our experiences as Zimbabweans. First and foremost, I want to inform the audience that in Zimbabwe we have two ministries: Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, the one that I head, and also Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology Development. I'll start with political rule in Zimbabwe. The government of Zimbabwe is very, very supportive in terms of foundational literacy. We have seen a number of initiatives being conducted by our government from the First Republic up to the Second Republic. In 1997, the government then initiated what was called the Education Inquiry, and Ziramasanga Commission of Inquiry into Education. And one of the major and prominent recommendations of the Education Inquiry was the issue of ensuring that early childhood education must be prioritized. And in Zimbabwe, ECD learning is compulsory. It is, we have an act of parliament that stipulates that every parent must ensure that their children attend ECDA, ECDB before they enroll in grade 1. So it is a basic human right enshrined on the Constitution of Zimbabwe. Section 75 of Zimbabwe speaks to the issue of ensuring that everyone has access to education, despite the fact that there might be members who belong to poor families who have safety nets that have been put in place. Our president, Dr. Idi Mnangagwa, is well known for saying no one and no place must be left behind. And in our case, those children from impoverished families, they have safety nets that have been accorded to them by the government. We have what we call basic education assistance module, which caters for those children from poor families. Those are safety nets to ensure that they are not disadvantaged, they are not deprived of their basic fundamental right to education. We also have what we call granting aid, which is given to students from early childhood development and care. So the government provides resources to ensure that everyone has access to education, and we need to commend the government for that. Then we've come up with a number of initiatives. There are so many. I will just highlight the major initiatives.
1 minute. One
Okay.
more minute. Yeah. 1 more minute. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. We have what we call ZELA initiative, Zimbabwe Early Learning Assessment. This is a tool which we use, an instrument that we use to assess and to benchmark the level of literacy and numeracy among the learners. And we have also done benchmarking. Before I was appointed as minister, I was the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Primary and Secondary Education, where we had to benchmark. We went to Kenya, we went to Ghana, we went to Finland. Finland is regarded as the best model of early childhood development and care, where we came back and reported, presented in Parliament, and we actually had to get some notes from Finland and Sweden. We also have what we call early reading initiative, and the catch-up strategies that we had in the morning. We all have those in Zimbabwe. So I could go on and on. There are so many.
So it looks
All
to
right.
me, it looks to me like what you're saying to us is that you have got the political will and you have designed some technical solutions. Now, what is the what do you think? What is the score of Zimbabwe on the learning poverty?
In terms of our literacy, Zimbabwe is rated among the top African countries that have high literacy.
I'm talking about
Yes.
literacy. Give it up to you because you're coming from when Zimbabwe was really, I mean, nobody could argue that. I'm saying that, are you as minister aware of the slippage that has happened in terms of the number of your children who by the age of 10 have those skills of foundational literacy and numeracy, there's been a setback over the decades, right?
We have the statistics.
And
We have, yes.
what is it?
Unfortunately, I can't give now because I have my secretariat. They can finish with the statistics.
All right. It gives me an opportunity to say something, which is that in my philosophy, you know, in God I trust. Every other person must bring their data, you know. So and that is to say that emphasis we started with this morning about assessments, getting the data, knowing what is working by virtue of what the data is telling us. You add it to teaching at the right level. You add it to structured pedagogy. You add it to keeping an eye to not create and entrench the rural-urban divide, you know, and we're beginning to sort of have something that is a wholesome package that we can actually take step by step. And so I thank you, but it would be good for us to be so specific in terms of what's going on with these children at this level. All of the policies you talked about are really wholesome, but you know, what's going on with the children at that level of literacy and numeracy? Minister Sierra Leone, I think you're ringing us out. Or did I talk about any other country? No. Yes. Oh, there's a hand. Yes. And then you will ring us out, Mr. Sierra Leone, on this topic. And then I'll tell you 2 things around the AU so that we can close out our session.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Francis Sampa from Zambia. Yes, I would also like to comment, just as we heard this morning, as Zambia, we have tried our best to ensure that we improve the literacy and numeracy. We have put in place interventions at early childhood education level. We have also put in place various programs to strengthen literacy in our classrooms at lower level and including the upper level, just as you heard concerning the culture program as well. Okay. But one thing that ministers must consider is also the fact that there is that language issue. The language issue is a big issue, especially in multilingual countries. So if we are talking about inclusive education, we are talking about reaching out to every child. It simply means that as countries, we need to actually sit on our tables and see what models do we want to see in our countries concerning the language.
Excellent.
Because, for example, in Zambia, we have got 7 languages that are actually used as languages of instruction. And we know the importance of initial literacy in familiar languages for children to have that self-esteem and also learn better initially. But we also have to actually appreciate the importance of English language that also they will need for their education as they grow up through the processing.
Okay.
So it's important to also think through how each language, considering their situation, would come up with a language, what kind of language model would actually make the results improve, because that's very cardinal and important as well, as something to put in our startup pack.
All right. Thank you very much for taking us back again to the language conversation. You know, no, it's okay. You see, this language thing, there have been researchers that paid attention to it and have some interesting findings and ideas of how even in a multilingual, diverse, by the way, I'm from Nigeria, our own number of, did you say 7? You are enjoying, oh, because in my own country, it's 431 languages. So, so you can just imagine what it felt like being a minister of education and having to deal with that, you know. So But there are findings on and ways of addressing this, which is why we go back again to evidence-informed approaches. It is so important that in everything that we're discussing here today, nobody should come to the ministry and tell you, I think this idea works. Show me the evidence. Show me the evidence. Where's the data? Where's the supportive argument for what you're saying? Because part of what has happened is that even presidents sometimes think that they know. So they would marshal you off and say, go and do so and so about the education sector. Well, you need to be able to counter that by, that is those of you who, like me, will face your president and say, sir, what you just said is not correct. And if you're going to be champions of the children, then you have to grow the muscle to be able to tell the president, sir, you know, maybe you will not do it as Obi would do it, but still do it with your data, with your evidence. And part of what we're saying is that there are a number of partners that can support. Oh, what data do you have on so and so? What evidence do you have on so and so? That's part of why this ADEA for the development of education in Africa exists. Use it. Use it as much as possible. We in the Human Capital Africa, we just said, okay, let's take a number of indicators that ministers, countries can be looking at and saying, how is it looking with us? We have something we call the adoption tracker. We have something we call the macro indicators. We have something we call the micro indicators. It would be a good idea for you to just take a look at that instrument, because we are working with Malawi and we're working with Uganda and some states in Nigeria through that. But I'm re-emphasizing the necessity for evidence-based action, the necessity for assessment, so that we can mine the data that's coming out. So we've done teaching at the right level. We've done we've talked about the structured pedagogy. We've talked about assessment, and most of all, we're saying we can do a lot of things at scale and change things. Minister of Sierra Leone, is it true? Go ahead. You've got 2 minutes, and then I will throw out some questions concerning AU.
Thank you very much. I think from what we've had today, let me just capture the moment. And I want to take you back in history. Harold Macmillan, the then president of, the then Prime Minister of Britain, delivered a speech in South Africa where he said, the wind of change is blowing through this continent, which was our continent. And whether we like it or not, this growth of national consciousness is a political fact. Let me adapt that slightly. From what we've had today, the wind of change is definitely blowing through our continent. And whether we want to accept it or not, there is a continental desire to address learning poverty. And this is an educational fact. I don't want to rehearse what everybody has said, but Sierra Leone, as you may know, have a very strong political will to make the change. But let me just say 3 things. We came to that on the basis of the results of a national baseline assessment, EGMA-EGRA, in 2021. And the results were not good. The data was not pointing in a northward direction. It was pointing very prominently southwards. And rather than running away from this reality, our president decided to take it on head on. I say this because he had sort of nailed his political career on the basis that education is a flagship. And with that type of results, most politicians will run away from it. But he decided that we needed to change the trajectory. And then we made a conscious decision to actually go for foundational learning. couple of things have come about as a result of that. One is that we now have a zero learning poverty plan, which we developed through our involvement
A plan
in accelerator.
that is in operation.
Yes. The second, we did not stop there because it was focused on those in educational establishment. We also developed a zero out of school poverty plan because we didn't want no child to be left behind. And going back to the whole issue of those that don't have a voice, we have decided that we needed a policy to take us through that. And we introduced something called the radical inclusion policy, which looked at the haves and the have-nots, the rural poor and those in the urban deprived, or if you might just say urban affluent. We also looked at pregnant girls who we did not want to leave out, even though the religious orders would tell us that we should, but we thought that they were victims. So the girl child and their education was prominent. So that's another thing that we use. And we have now made a number of legislative changes. But in addition to all the other things that other people have said, let me just very quickly go through this. We have introduced 4 different curricula, ranging from different levels of education, from early childhood to basic education to senior secondary education and to civic education, because we wanted to deal with this problem in a wholesome way. Secondly, in terms of our teachers, we are not just training our teachers who are in those classrooms now. We want to create a sustainable system, so we are also targeting the pre-service training of teachers. Other people have talked about the language of instruction. Whilst we have that in theory, we are now developing systems to make sure that that becomes a reality.
Right.
Engagement with parents and the community wide. And then, of course, the use of data.
Mm-hmm.
Because Sierra Leone is data rich, but we are data usage poor. And now we want to make the transformation.
Yes.
So make sure that we use data in making the right decision so that we have really impactful outcomes. I thank you for the privilege.
Well, thank you very much, Minister Sierra Leone. I think that from this session, we have seen different innovations, different approaches. Can I summarize by saying that from what we've gathered from those that spoke, and even those who have not spoken, but whose work we know of somehow or the other, that the idea of a starter pack on this rethinking foundational literacy and numeracy might just be a good idea. If you agree, please say yes. A starter pack. I'm not hearing the yes. If it is yes, then it is something that we should definitely take out of this meeting, and something that all development partners and you, we would start with a baseline and then iterate until we actually have something that is a starter pack. So if you are leaving from the ministry, you just put it as part of your handover note to whoever is coming. That's part of the way of systematizing so that it is not, dependent on who is honorable minister at any point in time. My sister was sitting jejely, as they say in Nigeria, in her Ministry of Agriculture, and they plucked her and said, go to education. She gets to education, she's going to what am I supposed to be doing here? A startup pack is a good idea. So we adopt it as one of the things coming out, right? Very good. The one on the AU Commission is that the AU Commission is more or less tied in, just crossing the, what do they say, dear Ruth? I'm going to come to you because you will close us out. What do they say about crossing the T and dotting the I? That's more or less where they are now in terms of their preparation for February summit, right? But when you look at what is likely to come to February summit, it would be a long list of things being called priorities. Would that really help us get a year of education that is solid? It won't, because we would be lost in the forest of the many ideas. So how do we, as a community of people who are now aware of the things that are really important for the continent to do as priority of all priorities, that is, fix the foundation, should we not have a means of engaging collectively with the way that the AU is putting out the number of priorities that this year should be about? Is that something that you think makes sense? So it makes sense, right? To make sure that we are corralling the agenda that will be discussed on our continent in a way that really gets to the heart of the matter, right? So one of the things that I thought I should put on the table, if I were Minister of Education coming to this event, one of the things that I would love to get would be some sort of guidance note that would help all of us, right? A guidance note of what are the critical issues that my president should be saying when they get to the summit. Because by having a guidance note approach, what would happen is you don't leave, there's something about measuring in the minors that happens, measuring in the minors. So the minor issues would suddenly be the most important thing, and you would load them in the speech that the president would make. You don't want that. You don't want that. You want them to make a speech that amplifies your power as a minister to do the kinds of reforms you need to do. So would the idea of a guidance note for how these statements that will be made, would it be helpful? Is it something that would be helpful? Because that is something that I'd like to, you are the owners of ADEA. ADEA belongs to you. ADEA is not some organization that invited you. No, you are the subscribers that created ADEA. So I'm sort of looking at Albert and thinking, how about working on a guidance note so that, by the time 15 presidents are harping on the critical issues in commonality, you know what would happen? What would happen is that the direction of the AU Year of Education will resemble exactly what all of you have been talking about here. So it doesn't get derailed into just a spacious, is it the right pronunciation? Very spacious kind of event that just comes and passes. Is that a good idea to try a hand on, to sort of do a guidance note approach so that when you are sitting with the president, because I know that once it concerns education, I would be the one writing what the president, is that not the same thing with you? Yeah. And then I would go and say to his speechwriter, if the content that I have put here changes, like if the content, because what we have written as draft for Mr. President is what reflects the sector he has given me responsibility for. So if you dare to change it and begin to speak some Pan-African English that would not take the children anywhere, so there has to be a way that we can support that process so that you all have presidents who come really, frankly speaking, I know what they do at the AU amongst presidents. Everybody wants to sound like I fixed all the problem in my country. This problem is for the rest of you that haven't done anything. And we want to make sure that we don't play that kind of a game, because it will be a costly game for our children, right? Because we are the champions of the children. So is that something that we can go away with? All right, so that's done. The third thing concerning the political is really where we're saying, which of you would be so kind to make sure that your president becomes a champion for AU year of education? How many ministers want to? You? Yeah. Yes, Sierra Leone. You, Malawi. You, Zimbabwe. You, yes, yes. We can literally say that all the ministers who attended this event, yes, I'm coming to her. I saw her. So that all of you that attended this event, you are going away with a specific mandate to convert your president to a champion for the year of education that is looking at this issue of correcting the foundation so that all the other levels that you're equally responsible for would perform better. Is that what we agreed? Excellent. Let me go to the minister for.
No, thank you very much, Chair. Without subtracting anything from what you've said, I would wish to tell my president not about lesson plan, structured lessons at AU, because AU is such a senior level. African leaders were very helpful in saying there must be universal access to primary education, and it happened. And for me, one of the key issues which are keeping us behind is your early foundations of learning. So presidents must pronounce on making early interventions in education as a major issue. Then structured lessons are, they're not a structure, they're a tactic about how to get to other things. So I will be comfortable to say if they announce, it must announce early access to learning at a very early stage. For ADEA, it's your data to get ADEA to be given resources for research. That's what I will promote so that there's a clear role. So I wouldn't want to get into a tactic which is structured lesson. I want to get to a policy issue which is access to early childhood education.
I don't think these are mutually exclusive though. So we're not at variance, all right? Because early, I mean, when one of the things that we struggled with when Finland, who is that person? There was a person from Finland earlier today. There was a lady from Finland. At that time, data pointed us to Finland. So we wanted to understand what it was they were doing better. And this universal access of both the rich and the poor child to early care, early childhood education was an important thing. The issue then became, we already have a fiscal crisis in terms of the budget for education. Now, if we add the layer of early child care education, which we call kindergarten education, we call it nursery school. Is that the same thing as what you call it? Yes. So we said if we added it as a cost on the public budget for education, how are we sure we would be able to do this? And so it now became a matter of how does the argument for it was strong, how to achieve it was then the issue. I tell you how we tried to solve it. We decided that that is that point of education where actually low-cost models can work. And that low-cost models work when they are designed to bring the parents, bring the community, bring the private sector, and then bring our own catalytical amount to solve it. So you and I are not at variance in the importance, because it's the inequality issue actually starts from the fact that the middle class children take early child care education for granted. It's a given, but the children of the poor won't get it. I was known as the minister who would say that at this particular time, while the children of the middle class are in their play centers and early child care centers, that the children of the poor are in the market drinking what we call ogi. Ogi is pap. drinking pap at the marketplace with their mothers. So even a further ossification of the brain is happening at that time. So I canvass for that, but we need to keep in mind the model that would support the financing of early childcare education as a universal program to integrate as part of what we've been talking about. So I kind of feel that we have had conversations that have led us toward a certain direction, right? Is that your sense? Does anybody have any particular thing? It's a two-hander, you must say it, or all of us would not have done anything useful here for you. Any two-hander? There's no two-hander. Oh, there's a two-hander. Kenya. Yes, please. Please. Well, a two-hander means this is absolutely important. I can't live here without saying it.
I just wanted Madam to make some comments on this concept of structured pedagogy. And as a teacher, when we're training our teachers in the teacher training colleges, in the universities, the teacher, is brought out as a person who is supposed to be innovative, who's supposed to use his own ideas, who's supposed to, for example, if you are supposed to plan what we are calling the professional documents a teacher must keep. And in some countries, it's a requirement. For example, in Kenya, it's a requirement for a teacher to keep professional documents, a scheme of work. The teacher is supposed to keep a lesson plan. The teacher is supposed to keep a student attendance register, a student progress report. All that must be kept. It's a requirement. And so at the pre-service level, we actually train these teachers and tell them a plan, a scheme of work is supposed to be personal. A lesson plan is supposed to be personal. How I present my lesson is not how the other person presents. But you see, in the foundational level, we've realized, and even in practice, at times these teachers, when they go to school and they graduate from the colleges, a number of them do not even do the lesson plans. They just use the textbooks like that. And so the idea of the structured pedagogy comes in at times it supports, but I believe there's a caution that we should take.
Yeah.
If we have to come up with this structured pedagogy, it must go through, rigid approval processes.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that teachers may not end up preparing this record and they just rely on the lesson plan that was done for them,
Mm-hmm.
on this record that was done for them. So the danger is they will not go out of that. So if we have to prepare those documents, they have to be rigid.
Mm-hmm.
There should be no any knowledge gap.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be comprehensive,
Mm-hmm.
so that at least it is taken care of properly in
Fair.
terms of the lesson plans, all the
Yes.
professional document assessments and all that. Thank you.
Very important point. And it's really about policy design. And I think that's the point that Madam Minister from South Africa was making. There's a level of flexibility and creativity and innovation that teaching requires. So, what you're basically saying is pay attention to that. So structured pedagogy makes a lot of sense. However, make sure that so and so and so is part of that process, right? Okay, I'm going to ask Ruth. Ruth, you've been, I have to say that I have a bias for her. She was the director of education at the World Bank, and she was my team member.
My boss.
Yeah, she was my team member. Everything education just runs in her blood. And then she went home to Kenya and supported the work so much. And globally, she's recognized for her effort on this matter of education. Just for 2 minutes, can you sort of give us a distilled version of all you've been hearing all day and a certain direction? And then I'll hand over the microphone to Albert.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind, I don't normally disagree with you.
I'm going to make a comment during dinner because I'm sensitive to the fact that there is another session between now and dinner. So if that's okay with you, I'll hold my comments until dinner so that we don't shortchange.
That's very good. That's so helpful. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, ministers and delegations, thank you very much. I think we've had a very interactive conversation, and I believe that there are takeaways for us from it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Please join me to thank Dr. Obi. As you can tell, thank you so much, Dr. Obi. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, whenever we meet, we try to do everything in the same day, but it's not easy. What I was going to propose, and thank you again for the discussion. I think we're coming up with something, tangible as we proceed and move to the year of education. And I like the different intervention from our ministers. Thank you so much for your contribution. What I was going to propose, the next session is the Interim General Assembly of ADEA. We did not want to invite you another day, another time. We thought, since you are here, let us brief you. As you know, ADEA is going through a restructuring. So we're setting up a new legal structure. I want to brief you the steps and the next steps for your endorsement. So I was going to propose, because time is not on our side, there are some delegates that are attending also online because they could not make it here. Can we take 10 minutes for you to stretch a bit? But this session, Interim General Assembly, is only for ministers and ministers' representative and partners that are already members of the steering committee. I see here African Development Bank is the room. I see the USAID is in the room. MasterCard Foundation, the third one, is attending remotely. So can we take 10 minutes and come back? Because I don't think it will take more than an hour, that session. Everything is ready. 10 minutes, let's meet and conclude. Thank you so much.